Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into one of the most influential stories ever told, the life of Jesus. Based on our source material, we're going to walk through the narrative that has literally shaped civilizations and guided the lives of billions.
So let's start with the big question. Who was Jesus? For 2,000 years, that question has captivated the world. Was he just a wise teacher, a prophet, a revolutionary? Well, let's unpack the story of his life, from its prophesied beginnings all the way to its world-changing conclusion.
To really get a handle on Jesus, our source material says we first have to understand the problem he was meant to solve. And that story, it doesn't actually start with his birth. It starts way, way back with a broken promise. Okay, so the narrative kicks off in this perfect world. But then a single act of disobedience completely shatters that perfection. It creates this huge gap, a separation between people and God. This is the central conflict of the whole story. But right at that moment of breaking, a new plan is put into motion. A promise that, one day, this broken relationship could be fixed. And the key to fixing everything was this promised figure, the Messiah, or the Messiah. For centuries, prophets kept talking about a savior who God would send to rescue his people. Can you imagine? Generations living with this incredible hope, this anticipation for the one person who would finally make things right again. So after all those generations of waiting, the story makes a huge shift from prophecy to a person. We move to the arrival of this promised Messiah who comes into the world not in some grand palace, but in the humblest way possible. And right from the very start, his life is just full of extraordinary events. The story describes this miraculous birth to a virgin named Mary, and then an angel appears to announce that he is the long-awaited Messiah. Even as a kid, at just 12 years old, he's stunning religious experts with his wisdom. And then, at 30, he officially begins his public mission. Now, this public ministry really boiled down to two powerful things: teachings that completely flipped conventional wisdom on its head, and miracles that just seemed to defy the laws of nature. Just think about how revolutionary this was. Seriously. In a world that was built on an eye for an eye, this simple command to love your enemies was like a seismic shock. It challenged the very core of how people thought about justice, society, and religion. He often taught using these simple stories called parables that always packed a huge punch. Take this one. You've got a self-righteous religious leader on one side and a hated tax collector on the other. And the takeaway? It was absolutely shocking for the time. God cares more about a humble, honest heart than someone who just looks perfect on the outside. And then there were the displays of power. The narrative is just packed with these accounts of incredible acts: giving sight to the blind, calming a raging storm with a word, feeding a crowd of thousands with just a handful of food, and even raising a man from the dead. These weren't just magic tricks. They were presented as signs of his divine authority. But as you can probably guess, this growing fame and this radical message, it created some powerful enemies. His claims were seen as a direct threat to the established order, and that's what pushes the story toward its dark and absolutely pivotal climax. The turn against him came from inside his own inner circle. One of the 12 disciples he had personally chosen, a man named Judas Iscariot, actually agreed to hand him over to the authorities who desperately wanted him silenced. And the price for this betrayal? Just 30 pieces of silver. The narrative really focuses on this stark, chilling number, pointing out that it was the exact amount foretold in an ancient prophecy about the Messiah being betrayed. So after the betrayal, he's arrested at night in a garden. And according to the account, he doesn't fight back at all. He knew this was all part of the path he had to walk. He's then rushed into a trial before the Roman governor, Pontius Pilate. And here's the crazy part. Pilate publicly says, "I can't find any crime this man has committed." But he ultimately caves to the pressure from the crowd and sentences Jesus to die by crucifixion. And even in his very last moments on the cross, his words were a perfect reflection of his entire message. Instead of cursing his executioners, he asks for their forgiveness. It was this final, powerful example of loving your enemies. But the story doesn't end with his death, not by a long shot. In fact, what happens next is presented as the single most important event in the entire narrative. It's the final answer to that problem of separation from the very beginning. 3 days after he died and was buried, his followers went to his tomb. But what they found was just unbelievable.
The huge stone that had been sealing the entrance was rolled away, and inside, the tomb was empty.
An angel then appears and delivers the message that would launch a global faith. He is not here. He has risen. This right here, this is the absolute heart of the story. It's the belief that death did not get the final say.
So, why does this matter so much? Well, in the context of the story, the resurrection is framed as the ultimate victory. It's presented as proof that Jesus was exactly who he claimed to be, that God's original promise was finally fulfilled, and that the separation between humanity and God was finally overcome, opening up a way for anyone to reconnect.
So what does the story all mean today? Well, for believers, it's the ultimate story of sacrifice, divine love, and hope restored, a promise fulfilled. But for history itself, it's the story of a figure whose life and reported victory over death changed the course of the world forever. And it leaves us with one last question. What is the power of a single story to shape all of humanity?